Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Firefighters Podcast, where we seek to develop, inspire, and motivate the world of the emergency services operator through a series of wide-ranging conversations. Now, before we go any further, just hit that rate, follow, or subscribe button on whatever platform you're listening to. It's a key performance indicator for us and helps us reach even more people. Now, here's what we've got for you today. Hey folks, welcome back to the podcast. This is episode 5 of 6 for our Lancashire IFE CPD event that I attended in 2024. Based all around structural firefighting and tactical ventilation. And this one is our final presentation. And this one's brought to you once again by John McDonough. In here, John goes into a fantastic subject, which I've heard him speak on before, which is knowing the spread. And this is his journey from as a training instructor for many, many years, then heading back out on the trucks on the fireground. So he's going to be looking at risk, expectation, and performance, and also gives us a wonderful, simple model for water application. Because across the range of these episodes, you may have found yourself thinking at times, because I did as well, hang on a minute, is this all realistic? Like, how am I supposed to use this in the moment? And John has a really fantastic way of turning the very academic, the very heavy, and the very conceptual, analytical, mathematical, data-driven pieces into the real world. So he takes us through a 36-year journey, what he has learned over that period of time, how he's then looked to re-examine the balance between the physical tasks and the knowledge. And as I've already said, he does a wonderful job of helping us unpack the hypotheticals. So I think you're going to love this one. I love John. He really is a great storyteller. And really, we learn through stories, right? He is a teller of tales, a spinner of yarns, a really great narrator. And in this presentation, he does an amazing job of chronicling his journey to where he is now as a very highly respected international speaker on fire behavior. So it's really great. I know you're going to enjoy this one. It's a great way to cap off our presentation element of this 6-part series. And then finally, coming up next in episode 6, you can hear me and a few others sit down for a round table as we pull at the threads of a few of these presentations and just go a little bit deeper with some calibrated questions. And you get to hear some of the members of the audience as well, some of the attendees that were there joined us for the round table. So that is what waits for you in the next episode. A final reminder, look in the notes below and be sure to go and download the associated presentations for all 6 of these. Please share them with people. Please share this recording with people. Drop it in the WhatsApp group, ping it in the email, put it on the fire service newsletter weekly thing that you have, and just throw it out there. It's up to them what people pick up and do with it. But you do hear a lot that people moan about not having good resources. Well, actually, it's just their resourcefulness. These resources are out there. These events, these presentations, the evolution of YouTube, podcasting, whatever it might be. This has been a real gift to be able to bring these people, these stories, this knowledge to the wider population of firefighters both across the world and right here in the UK. Our sincere hope is this will serve people beginning their career, in the midst of their career, and for future generations of firefighters as well. So without further ado, let me hand over to the wise and wonderful John McDonough for our final presentation, and I'll see you on the other side.
So this is a bit of a change in pace, not so much scientific, but there's a bit in there. It's more about how I've sort of, over my career, sort of tried to put this in some sort of framework. I was talking with some guys at lunchtime, and I think there's the theoretical and the science. I call that the back end, but there's also a front end. And it seems like for the first 15 years of my career, it was all front end. It was just get on that hose, get in there, deal with it. Ignorance is bliss. I can give many examples where that was the case. And then I sort of found out I didn't have much back end apart from experience. If you have actually asked me what was actually happening, well, first I'd probably be amazed. Like I'd think, well, there's not much happening. It's just a fire, right? And we just go in there, and if I put enough of that on, it goes out. And then I found out that there's a lot more to that, and it sort of set me on another trajectory. So, and in some ways, yeah, I think I've sort of come a full circle. We go in spectrums, and pendulums go from one side to the other, and balances, and it's about getting that balance right. So what I would like that if anyone has a question to ask that question, or if something doesn't sound right, or it doesn't seem to fit in with your experiences, this is much more of an opinion piece than, I mean, that's the beauty of science. It's sort of black and white. It doesn't sort of bullshit to you. But this is certainly how I feel at the moment, and some of the things that have led me to feel that way, and how I like to view things that help me make better decisions with my guys. But like I said, it's very much an opinion piece. And if something doesn't sort of sit right, let's talk about it and see where we go.
This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Gore-Tex Professional Fabrics. Now, we all know the working environment of a firefighter is filled with challenges. We face serious risks on the job, such as heat exhaustion, burns, physical and mental stress, and we frequently come into contact with high levels of toxic chemicals. Now, I have been wearing Gore-Tex for nearly 2 decades on the front line, working in hostile environments, tackling challenging incidents from firefighting to water incidents and in urban search and rescue environments. Gore-Tex have a well-earned reputation for protecting professionals in the fire and emergency services through their family of highly innovative, waterproof, breathable moisture barriers that exceeds global performance standards and are trusted worldwide. Gore-Tex, going further together.
So really looking at risk, expectation, performance, I think risk is a big one. Certainly in my 38 years, whole of society has tended to become more risk adverse, and that's probably a good thing, but I think that can be misplaced sometimes. You ask an Australian firefighter what they think of American firefighters, and they'll say, those guys die all the time falling through roofs. Now, they have 350 million people in that place, 30,000 separate fire services, a very high percentage of volunteers. And depending on the stats that you look at, and if you take the hometown heroes, stroke and heart attack and car accident away, they have an outstanding record. And very, very few people die falling through roofs. But there's this perception, which I don't think social media has helped. So, we all have these perceptions about risk and what we do and so on. So once again, I try and unpack some of that, mostly just to make me feel like I'm on the right track and to lessen my stress and anxiety when I started sending guys into burning buildings again. And a simple model for water application. It's pretty much what we teach our recruits. It sort of came to a head some months ago with an online discussion about what was an indirect attack, what was possible to do with an indirect attack. So I thought I would show how we teach indirect attack. And it's the same as how Karel teaches it in Belgium. But I find that in other places, indirect attack may mean many different things. In our old books of firemanship, our old blue reader, we had a picture, a sort of a hand-drawn picture of a firefighter bouncing a straight stream off the ceiling onto a fire that was covered by a cupboard or something like that. And it said that's an indirect attack. So to ricochet a straight stream onto a fire is an indirect attack. That was in our books. Now I'd contend now that's not an indirect attack, that's a ricochet direct attack. And these things are important if you're going to share expectations. So I do talk about a simple model for water application. It may also help you with how you manage, should I be using droplets or should I be using a straight stream, which seems to be very much the talk of the town across into the US and certainly around the place. So I need to update that a little bit, 36 years, but first 15 before I went to Sweden, so that got me to station officer. And we are like the UK, unless it's changed with you guys, we all start at the bottom and we go through our career. In Europe and in Belgium, that can be done differently as well, where you come in with a degree laterally. Do you do that as well? Okay. I don't know whether that would work in Australia. I get it. We do that in the military without any qualms in many cases. But our culture sort of, there's an expectation that the officer sitting in the front has X amount of experience and so on. But that can also backfire. But my first 15 years, like I said, I read Fog Attack. I ended up in Sweden. I ended up in Sando. And then everything changed. Everything suddenly got, the next 5 years, very overwhelming. I felt like I knew nothing. Probably a pretty good example of that was, I remember doing a lecture to a crew, and we used to do a lecture, then a burn, and we'd finished the burn, and Tommy O'Shea was this SO. He's retired now, but a big sort of fat guy, and he'd been in the job for quite a while. And he's sitting there, and he's hot and flustered. We'd done the lecture the day before, and we did the burn, a demo burn. And I said, Tommy, what do you reckon? And he said, you guys are a pack of, insert your own swear word there. And I said, why is that? And he said, well, after the lecture yesterday, I didn't sleep last night. I've been to fires like you described, but I didn't understand them. Ignorance was bliss. I've sent guys into situations that we discussed. They always came out, and he said, now I'm not so sure. He said, you sort of put some of the pieces of the jigsaw puzzle together. Now, we didn't make Tommy's life any easier that day. We introduced doubt. We introduced knowledge, by all means. But his words that we were a pack of bastards was what he thought at the moment. But he said ignorance was bliss, and now it wasn't. So that's a bit how I felt as well. I felt angry. I felt that my organisation hadn't taught me this, and it should have. Maybe I should have known this. So the next 5 years, the next 10 years, not a lot of light here, but there's all equations here. Everything was overwhelming. I didn't know enough. I didn't know the science of it, and I'm not a real science guy. But so I just embarked on this learning, and the last sort of 10 years, I suppose, has been, well, what really matters though? What else is there to it? What's the front end? Is it all just about the science and the fire behaviour? And that's sort of where I'm at the moment. And it's been my journey for the last 6 years. So that's what I'm going to sort of share today, and you can see what that looks like. I wanted to re-examine the balance between the physical task and the knowledge side of it. So 25 years ago, less knowledge, more physical capability, I suppose, more experience, confidence. And then, as often happens with these things, the pendulum then sits the other way. So I started thinking about some hypotheticals to sort of help me through this. And one of them was, who's instructors in this room? Is, I think, probably a good percentage, okay? So if I gave you a hypothetical where, you had to teach firefighters anything you like about firefighting, any combination of theory or practical. It can be a small practical, a candle and a cup. It can be a doll's house. It can be a bang box. It can be a large volume container. It could be anything you like. Any elements of theory, you can teach them anything whatsoever. You've got the full choice. But at the end of that training, they have to be able to go into a burning building. And you can run the program, you can design it, you can spend as much time as you like, but you've only got 2 hours to teach them. At the end of 2 hours, they can wear breathing apparatus. Let's face it, not too hard, just put it on and breathe. All those BA instructors, no, I haven't, yeah. But you've only got 2 hours. At the end of it, take a hose into a burning building and extinguish a fire. What would you teach them? Sorry? Okay, hold on to that thought. Too soon. You took away my grand. What would you teach? Forget you heard that. There's all these things here that you could teach them, right? You've got the theoretical, you've got all of these things here, right? The studies, all of this here. What would you teach them? And you would teach them just hose work, get on the line, throw water around. It's exactly what I would do. I would just get them there doing reps. Get down low, moving a hose, using water. That's all I'd do in 2 hours. What if you had 4 hours? What if you had 6 hours? What would you teach? So really what you've got to make a decision is, how long does it take to remember the theoretical concepts, and how long does it take to get any sort of muscle memory? With your recruits, how long would they actually spend opening a nozzle and closing it into smoke, into fire, or even just out in the yard? Is it minutes? Is it seconds? I reckon with our retained firefighters, you could nearly measure it in a minute or two, where they were actually the ones. Even half an hour out in the yard with a couple of firefighters, how long are they actually getting that muscle memory? Right? What about permanent firefighters? We have a 3-week course where they do live fire. But if I actually counted how long they were actually the ones on the nozzle doing it, it'd be mere minutes, I'm sure. We put them in a classroom for 5 hours and teach theory. Now, I'm not saying the theory is not necessary, but, maybe the pendulum has come too far the other way. In fact, I'd probably say if I had a full week, I'd probably still just stick with moving hose quickly and efficiently. Perhaps, right? Absolutely agree with you. Another hypothetical, if we had 100 fires, if you had 100 fires here in the UK and you could pick 100 random UK fire crews and you could have them attack those fires. So these fires are exactly the same. Exactly the same fuel arrangement, they're exactly the same cottage or whatever you decided. They get there at the same time and they've got the same equipment. 100 firefighters, 100 fires, and this is performance. Here's our bell curve again. We would end up with something like this. The high performers, they would keep it to the rim of origin. The low performers, the house would burn down. The majority, I think, and these are my guys, this is Fire Rescue New South Wales. The majority of the time, I think we'd lose 2 to 3 rooms. Does that look sort of similar? Every organisation has these guys, and then you have this majority here. The question is, what is the difference between those two? What is the fundamental difference? Is it that one knows what a gravity current is and the other one doesn't? What would you say the fundamental difference was? Speed, yeah. All of those come together, but they're just faster. They're just faster. If all things are equal, and with expertise comes speed, so they're better in everything they do. They do everything better. So if we had a look at, if they take an extra minute laying hose, an extra minute putting their BA on, an extra minute gaining entry, an extra minute moving in through that entry point, an extra minute going down the hall because they're having discussions and sending radio messages, an extra minute trying to use their water, give a fire 5 minutes. Give a standard residential fire in Australia another 5 minutes and it burns down, right? Or it's 2 to 3 rooms, right? That's the only difference between those, fundamentally. And how much do we put into this to make sure we save 5 minutes? What makes someone faster? Is it the knowledge and mastery? Is it the knowledge or the mastery of those physical skills, right? How many reps are they doing? How quickly can they move down that hallway and manage their hose? And there are other factors that were drawing me in a certain direction. Does overthinking slow us down? You could have a crew that's fast and ready to go, and then the boss just holds them up and says, wait a minute, I'm not quite sure what's happening here. What's the building, smoke, air train, heat, flame? What's all these things doing? Because I've got this checklist I've got to go through. Is that smoke really as dark as I think it is, or is it just the failing light, or is it, gee, I don't know, what velocity is that coming out at? What class was that I did? Just have the boss hold them up for another couple of minutes and perhaps the house burns down. Now, I'm not saying we shouldn't take time to assess, but at some point we've got to act. And this is what makes our job one of the most one of the most challenging jobs in the world, right? Have we loaded that officer up? Are we thinking about stuff we don't need to? I often think that, ask myself, have I made the timid firefighter? Behind every door is a backdraft or a fire gas ignition or a flashover. What about the timid officer?
In other news, this episode is brought to you in partnership with MSA Safety. Today we have them to thank for the improved firefighter safety through connectivity in their brand new connected firefighter system. At the centre of the connected firefighter platform is the MSA M1 SCBA with telemetry. You can view battery life, air pressure and estimated time remaining either independently on the M1 itself or from the Luna connected device screen. Also, still with the air status, alarm information, search status and all of this provided to the incident command for confident decision making during the scene. That integrates straight in with the Luna system, which is a wireless all-in-one device creating an independent search and rescue network, providing edge detection, enhanced personal thermal imaging, while simplifying post-scene reporting and data retention. One of the key parts of the Luna is their FAST system, the Firefighting Assisting Search Technology. This combines directional and distance information with thermal imaging to help find separated teammates and decrease response time. It actually connects you to the other crews in the vicinity for a unified search during the time of mutual aid by instantly notifying the network of Luna devices when there is a downed crew member, allowing for a prompt search and rescue. All of this then plugs into the FireGrid system for cloud-based connectivity, real-time information and data-driven decisions for the incident commander. Enables you to see the exact location of your firefighters on the scene. and it doesn't require you to be sat on the station. The MSA Hub then provides a wireless gateway straight to the cloud, enabling wireless on-scene data for local and remote incident command for additional eyes on the scene. MSA are truly taking massive strides in the future of improved firefighter safety through connectivity. MSA is dedicated to increasing safety in the fire service through technological advancements. Various feature enhancements, new products, partnerships, and integrations will provide additional capabilities readily accessible by products, software, and services in the brand new MSA Connected Firefighter platform. Now back to the show.
We've got Dustin Hoffman here. He's, I don't know if everyone's seen the movie, but I'll play a little video in the moment. It's from the boys from Brazil. Now, he's been captured by some Nazis, and they think he knows something, and he knows nothing. And they're going to try and get some information out of him. I want you to look at this, and it's not Klaus Barbie, some Nazi doctor trying to torture him. It's me talking to one of my SOs, or maybe you've had this conversation with one of your station officers, where I can pretty much make him or her say whatever I like.
Is it safe? Is it safe?
You're talking to me.
Is it safe?
Is it safe?
What's...
Is it safe?
I don't know what you mean. I can't tell you if something is safe or not unless I know specifically what you're talking about.
Is it safe?
Tell me what it refers to.
Is it safe?
Yes, it's safe. It's very safe. So safe you wouldn't believe it.
Is it safe?
No, it's not safe. It's very dangerous. Be careful.
It's a great... I feel like that's a conversation with a station officer. I showed them a picture of a burning building and I go, is it safe? And they're sort of looking at it and they're going, what does John want to hear here? Yeah, it's safe. Well, what about this black smoke? What about the level of neutral plane? What about da-da-da-da-da? Oh, no, it's not safe. It's not safe. I can make them say whatever I like because I just introduced this stuff, right? And I sometimes wonder if, as the pendulum went the other way and suddenly everything was just a disaster waiting to happen, that I made the timid officer. And I'm not so sure that that's safer or not. I'm not so sure that that makes them effective and confident. I don't know where that balance is, but I'm not, I think that's tipped in the wrong direction perhaps. So once again, what's important and what's not. So when I return to operations, once again, we did some stuff on the non-negotiables. This became an important thing to try and sift through what's important and what's not. And we worked through these here. But there was 3 other sort of interconnected concepts that sort of I started thinking about, and they may be of value to you guys. The first one is what I call the equation. The other one is knowing the spread. And the last one is strategies and tactics from the bottom up. Very typical sort of Australian fire in one way. Is that dangerous? Is it safe? Is it safe? Actually, they're pretty easy because we can just put some water in there. If anyone's found refuge here, we're probably okay. In this case, it's probably in the roof. But that's not abnormal. That's totally normal. It can be normal bad or normal good, but it's not fair to say that's abnormal or a problem necessarily because it fits my experience and it fits my expectations. And I'll just apply something to it. The equation. I started thinking very simply about the prevailing fire conditions versus the firefighter capability, just as a simple equation, one versus the other. And if we look here, that if they're greater, if their capability is greater or equal to, we're going in. This is conceptual, but I sort of think of it in those sort of terms. Conversely, if this is greater than them, we stay outside and go defensive. So I'm trying to take the personalities out of it. I'm trying to take the Facebook memes out of it and so on. we recognise that there's a whole bunch of variables here. They're the fire behaviour ones we teach. That's the back end. That's some of the stuff Karel talked about. This is all black and white essentially. It's knowledge. What makes that difficult is we can't see it all. It's inside a box perhaps, or our experiences and our knowledge doesn't extend to understanding them. But that doesn't bullshit to you. The other side, our firefighters, right? We have just as many variables. Perhaps they're more likely to tell you they're good when they're not, or they're bad when they are better, or trying to work out. I don't know exactly what their motivation, confidence, trust, and experience is. The non-negotiables, I tried to take out some of the variables by at least saying if they go into a burning building, they're going to do X, Y, and Z. But essentially, I'm trying to get this equation right. Now, if I get the equation wrong, risk increases. If they're not better than this or have the capability for this, risk goes up. Maybe just a little bit. Maybe risk to the room of origin. It's going to be 3 rooms that burn now. Maybe the risk will increase enough that someone gets hurt, but the risk will increase. The other thing to clear my mind is I try not to think of the victim as part of this equation. Why can't I have the victim in this equation?
Because you get focused on that.
Yeah. But if I just look at it in a black and white sense, but you're right, it complicates. Absolutely it does. It adds emotion, but essentially, does the victim change the fire behaviour in any way whatsoever? So it doesn't affect that side of the equation. Does the victim suddenly make firefighters better at their job? No, in some ways it might make them worse. So it doesn't affect that side of the equation. So I can't use it in the equation. If the only reason we're going in is because there's someone in there to rescue, risk will increase because the equation may not be matched now. Does that make sense? It sounds sort of brutal, but I think that this, once again, it's about clearing my mind and making better decisions. It neither changes the prevailing fire conditions nor suddenly makes the firefighters more capable. If you look at line of duty deaths in many cases, they've ignored the fire, maybe not so much these days, but ignored the fire to do a search. The next part of these sort of clearing of my own head is knowing the spread. And this is interesting. This is a really good one to do with your crews. It's another hypothetical. If you had this fire here in the UK, maybe it's 3 stories. Let's say it's 3 stories up, and here is another window with smoke coming out and someone's waving, someone to be rescued. So a 3-story walk up, 1 enclosure is fully involved. They're linked because smoke's coming out of both of them. So there's a time element here. What would the fastest UK crew park, get the large ladder off, put their breathing apparatus on, put the ladder up, 1 guy foots it, 1 goes up, climbs in a metre by metre window in full breathing apparatus, walks across a room, closes the door, isolates that room while the others put the fire out? How long would that take? The fastest crew, the gun crew. There sort of should be an answer for this because if I don't know that, how am I going to get the equation right? Right? Sorry? A couple of minutes, yes? Yeah, 3 minutes? That's exactly what my guys say. They tend to say 3 minutes. They don't say what they do it in. They just say, oh, the fastest, 3 minutes. Because the next question is, what would the slowest crew in the UK do it in?
15 minutes.
Yeah. 15 minutes? 10 minutes? There's a bit of a, I say there's a do not complete element to this, where you just can't send them up. There's a good likelihood they'll fall trying to crawl in 3 stories up in breathing apparatus through a small window. And then you've got to ask yourself, well, when was the last time they did this? Right? So we'll discard the do not complete. So we've got a spread from 3 minutes to 10 minutes. And that's exactly what my guys say, right? And I timed all my stations, but it's about 2.5 minutes if they don't have to discuss it. And it's on a nice clear day. There's the training tower. There's the pump. They don't have to discuss how to get this thing off, and they don't have to discuss, and they just do it. It's about 2.5 minutes. But we know that it could be 10, right? So I call that the spread. So the fastest, You can even see here, I had two guys on this particular shift. Which one looks more comfortable? This guy here, he used to run electricity lines, like he was up ladders all day before he joined the job. You know, he's leaning back on the thing, he's up at like scurrying up like a rat. This guy here is sort of holding close. So even on each shift, there's going to be differences. But, you know, we were coming up with this figure here. It's funny how I can ask that question and you guys come up with the same, right? So that's the spread. Now, here's the problem, that if I send one of those young officers again to the other side of town and they get this fire, how do they know whether they've got these guys or these guys when they get that fire? Right? So if they don't know, to get the equation right, you've got to know the spread. And the problem we have is there's a spread on every single one of these task level skills. And that gets back to that, spend an extra minute because your spread on getting your BA on is twice as long as someone else's. How do you set a strategy and tactic if you don't know the task level spread? So if you arrive, essentially what we're doing to that 3-story walk up, I think I've got enough time to get a crew up there before the fire gets to there. So we make that call. We use experience, we use a certain amount of knowledge, I suppose. And you think they've got a couple of minutes, and then they break your heart as they spend all of that just trying to undo the latch that gets the ladder off. Your fantastic tactic doesn't work now. You should have called it from the start and done something else. So the last sort of connector here for me is, I think what we've taught our officers to do is to set strategies and tactics from the top down. We set a strategy, we're going offensive or defensive. We're going to use these tactics, a hose over here and through that door, and we're going to use you guys. So that's strategy first, then tactics, then task. Does that sound familiar sort of thing? Well, that's going to break if you don't know the spread and the equation, because what we need to do is say, who have we got here? Oh, we've got the 10-minute guys, right? I can't use that tactic now. Now I'll have to go defensive. It's completely different from saying, we're going to go offensive, we're going to get that ladder up. Oh, we haven't got the guys. Perhaps it's better that we concentrate on task level capability gives us viable tactics and then gives us possible strategies. Now, it might be a very subtle difference, but to me, that's going from the bottom up, not from the top down. And when I talk to my crews, it really is about, you're the most important people in this. You're actually setting the tactics and strategies by giving me that option. And it just sets in a completely different sort of framework of how those guys view themselves in this, right? So essentially, and I've gone through it fairly quickly, but I look at it as an equation. I'm just trying to match it properly. And like I said to my SOs, I don't care if your guys suck. You just have to know they suck. Of course, if you think they're better than what they really are, risk will increase, right? And I have these conversations with my guys, and when I talk about the spread, everyone says the same times, but everyone's sort of laughing, and when I say, well, what's the slowest? But you know what everyone's thinking, don't you? Where am I on that spread? No one comes up and says, I'm X or Y or Z. They'll give me the slowest and the fastest. But what I'm really asking them to think about is, where are you on that spread, right? If that fire was in your area and your family, who do you think you're getting? Everyone thinks they're getting the 3-minute crew. You're more likely to get the 10-minute crew or some other crew, but we all think we're getting the 3-minute crew. So it starts to add this pressure that sort of says, what do I want to be? How do I want to act? So at this point, my thinking sort of, well, you know, let's park the fire science a bit and just work on the task level stuff. But I found that a lack of fire dynamics understanding could cause some questionable tactics. So I had to take a rethink. And the one that got me was this picture. And you've seen it a couple of times now, but it's a good picture of a fire where the guys should put some water in from outside, right? There's no excuse for not putting some water in from the outside. And yet I taught guys not to do that 10 years ago. Why? You'll push the fire and you'll create messy, steamy conditions and you'll hurt people and you'll kill victims, all of that sort of stuff. I once had a fire, while I was teaching that, a guy comes up to me after the class and I'm going, no, you've got to get inside, you've got to get up those stairs, you've got to push it back out the other way. And afterwards, when the firefighters came up to me, and he was an experienced guy, been in the job for probably about 20 years, and he said, John, he said, just a question, we had a fire last week, and it was sort of like shops with a sort of accommodation above, sort of semi-detached sort of main street of this suburb. And he goes, there was sort of a bank or something down below and there's accommodation above and the fire's above and it's sort of blowing out the window and they're having trouble getting into this place. And he said, so the crews have laid down their 38, it's charged, they're trying to get into this place and he's watching this thing there and he's just the motor driver and he's gone, I just felt so helpless that I just picked up the hose reel and I just shot it in the window. And I said, yeah. And he said, but it went out, right? I just spent an hour telling him, don't do that. And he said, it went out. And then I had to explain to him how that could possibly happen. So I just said, you were lucky. You were just lucky, right? And we ended it at that. And then 20 years later, we're talking about, no, it's an imperative. And it's quite simple. See fire, put water on it. Fire goes out, stop the water. You know, try and keep that as steep as possible. But when we did the exterior attacks in UL, if that was on the ground floor, you'd have guys kneeling down and putting a straight stream against the ceiling. Whereas my guys would just go in and put it out. So once again, there's an easier way to just be a robot.
Ever heard the quote that true leaders are readers? Well, we believe this is true. Listeners often ask where we go to keep our finger on the pulse of what's happening in the sector globally. So there are a few key publications which I encourage you to go check out. Now, if you're looking for insights on disaster management, fire protection and firefighting, for us, we go to Asia Pacific Fire Magazine. And when you're looking for the latest on the Middle East fire protection industry and fire services, it's Gulf Fire Magazine. And our quarterly check-in is with International Firefighter Magazine, reporting to municipal, industrial and fire training professionals. Now, next up and widely accepted to be the global voice for passive and active fire protection. This is a good one. It's International Fire Protection Magazine. And finally, and perhaps the most relevant to our predominantly UK audience, I'd strongly suggest subscribing to UK Fire Magazine, reporting to the United Kingdom fire protection industry and fire services. We're really excited to announce that after a long-standing relationship and mutual respect, we've now partnered with MDM Publishing, who bring you all of these essential publications. Because in a world of change, the learners shall inherit the earth, while the learned shall find themselves perfectly suited for a world that no longer exists. Eric Hoffer said that, and I believe he was right. So keep growing, keep learning, and keep yourself in the know and at the cutting edge of what's happening globally by dropping into the notes. And as a gift from the podcast, you can actually subscribe to any of these publications for free using the link in our notes. Now back to the show.
So I went through this again with my crews and I said, what would you do here? You got one pump. The SO has sent a crew in. They've gone up these stairs here, because that's what we do. We're going to try and be fast and effective. We may find someone collapsed in the hallway. And I said, what can the motor driver do to help out here? What do you think everyone said, or most? Or what was I searching for? Just put it in, put it through. I don't care whether it's the hose reel or whether it's a 38, preferably the hose reel. And most motor drivers said, yeah, no problems. And a couple said, I can't do that. What was the problem? They said, I can't do that. No, but that we're going to talk about that in a moment. Sorry? Yeah, they said, I'm not there. I'm down the road shipping a standpipe. So we had this, and I'm shocked. I'm going, well, that didn't meet my expectations. I'm glad we're talking about this. So half of my motor drivers were down the road getting water in. So why was that such an imperative? They don't want to run out of water, but who was on their case about running out of water? Appliance training, the motor drive guys. The one thing you don't want to do is run out of water. As soon as you got water out, you're getting water in. So once again, we weren't, right? The other thing was, even the experienced guys are going, well, I've seen that water go pretty quickly. So they were worried about running out of water, and legitimately in some regards. So essentially, I can't do an exterior attack, I must get water in. So this became a question, well, how much water do you think you need? You've got 2,000 litres. You've got one compartment. It's funny, I showed this in Belgium on the course last week, and they all started laughing. At that, some of the firefighters I was training last week were at this fire. And they said, this guy looks exactly like the guy that was the motor driver. Remember when they said that? A younger version of the guy that was actually outside to put water on that fire. Who would have thought? Anyway, so now we've got this question. This guy's trying to make a decision. The station officer's gone. There's an expectation he's going to help out. The crew's in the hallway. They're cooling. They're trying to do something here. And maybe he's not there. So I started asking, fully involved room, I'd make it up, just say, it's a lounge room, maybe the potential, if you added all the fuel up, of 10 megawatts, but we've got a window open there, maybe it's 5 or 6 megawatts. Carol, would you have to take a guess?
Yeah, 6, 7, 8 perhaps, depending on
6, 7, 8, okay, so we've got a decent fire, right? And I got answers somewhere between 500 and 2,000 litres. What would your guys say? Yep, what would your guys say?
guys would say probably the same number.
This is what I mean. Yeah. And I was asking other inspectors and who didn't have an education because they'd already left college 20 years before we even started CFPT. So this back end became a problem. So really in here, we've got full involvement, 1,000 degrees. What's happening in the hallway? Maybe 500 degrees, radiation. Its curve is growing. Maybe there's a victim here. What's the heat flux? Maybe the auto-ignition temperature of their clothes. This is what they found out. You put water in here and this changes. What happens when we put water in from outside? Drops this, theirs drops. The guy's gas cooling in the hallway. Go, thank you. It's not rocket science. So after we finished this, all the station officers said, no problem, we know we're going to put water in as soon as we've radioed the crew inside. Second shock of the day. Why are you radioing the crew inside? Then it came out, well, we need to warn them. Warn them from what? Like if you don't dig, you don't get these answers, right? So now I had station officers that were not going to put water in from outside or direct their crew to until they'd contacted the interior crew to warn them. What's this crew doing? They've got their ass hanging out. Let's stop them from gas cooling and stop them from moving while they answer a radio call and then get that weird message back and forth. You're breaking up, can you repeat? Woo! Is that a safe thing to do? All they need to, what are they thinking? Put some water in. Please, come on guys, put some water in. It's an expectation, so why do we need to warn them? I call it redundant radio messages. Do you have them? We have a range of them. The CAN report in the middle of the hallway to tell me something I already know is another one, right? I'm not saying there's not a role for a CAN report, but, you know, we're teaching recruits that will be expected once they get halfway down the hallway. Young officers will fail their SO's exam if they don't ask for a CAN report from a crew they just sent in. How much do I really need to extinguish? Well, maybe I do need to know all of this other stuff to help me, whether I'm an officer or a motor driver, from making some bad tactical decisions. Like I said, that would have been a bad tactical decision if I had a motor driver running down the road instead of supporting those guys. So how do I put all this water usage in some sort of format that can be applied to the task? So I keep it simple again, the right amount in the right format. Am I going to use droplets or a straight stream, an indirect attack or a direct attack, and put it in the right place? So the right amount, the right format, right place. That's science. So we can work out what it is to be 100% efficient with our water. I'm going to do that in a moment. That's science. In the right format is science. I must get all of my water to vaporize. If I don't, I'm not being efficient. Now here's the problem. A good firefighter uses steam and loves steam because that's most efficient. But in the back end, we may be telling a firefighter to be afraid of steam and worry about steam and not use steam. Well, there's a conflict now. They may not use enough water now. That's science. We need to convert as much of our water as possible by decreasing its surface area. In the right place where that's spatial, don't miss. So you can't see the graphic here, but there's some droplets and there's some droplets. And I think it's really just as simple as this in my mind. The longer the distance away and the greater the volume versus wider cone to narrow cone to jet is just a simple. All that's really saying is if I can't throw my droplets where I want, I'm going to have bigger droplets until it's a straight stream, because I'm going to have to sacrifice the ability to convert my water to steam. If I'm looking at cooling in the three-dimensional sense, I want my droplets to vaporize. If I have to use a stream and cool the surrounding area to help boundary cool, it's less efficient. Primary source is the hot smoke. Secondary source is the boundary to cool the primary source. Doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Put your water into the smoke. Anyway, I think that I'd be glad if someone could break that, but in my mind, that's sort of what I'm thinking when I'm using water. We then talk to our firefighters about what one droplet of water does versus a litre of droplets. Now, I never got taught this, but certainly for the last 10 years, this is how we talk about water extinguishment. To answer that question of how much water does it take to extinguish a single room in your house, so that they don't go running down the road to get water in if it's not necessary. So when that one droplet flies into hot smoke that's hotter than itself, maybe it's 20 degrees in the hose, or into fire and flaming combustion, what's the first thing that happens to that droplet? The first thing that happens, sorry? It raises in temperature, yeah. Now most guys will say it vaporizes, and it does that, but first it's going to, right? It's going to heat up till it reaches 100 degrees. Specific heat of water. You guys probably teach this, yeah? I'm sure I learned that as a recruit, but no one told me why it was important. So 4.2 kilograms per kilogram per Kelvin degree. So we can measure it. The energy we transfer from the smoke to the cold water droplets so the water reaches a temperature of 100 degrees for a split second. The next thing that happens is it vaporizes. Now you can see here 4.2 kilograms per kilogram, 2,260 kilojoules per kilogram. If it's not vaporizing, you're not being effective. If it's not turning it to steam. That's the biggie. Our droplets have to go into the hot stuff and we have to vaporize it. Energy we transfer from the smoke to the hot water droplets to the water is completely vaporized. We can measure it per litre. So if we put that droplet first into 600 degrees and it's only 20 degrees, it rises in temperature and the smoke drops a little bit. It's like Karel mentioned, the universe is just trying to reach equilibrium. Hot goes to cold, high pressure goes to low pressure. I've got hot and cold going in, the cold raises a little bit in temperature and the other one lowers in temperature. What happens to my steam if I've got 100 degree steam now in 300 degree smoke or 400 degree smoke? What's got to happen to my steam? Sorry? Yeah, it'll expand. That's another advantage, but it increases in temperature. So we now have the specific heat of steam. We can measure that. So essentially our water goes in, it heats up, it turns to vapor, and then the vapor heats up until there's equilibrium. 600 degrees, just about to carry flame from the room where it's starting out, and we go ch, and that 600 drops to 300. Then the convection currents take it away and we do it again. Or maybe we don't. And then that was a useless cooling, right? So that's all we're doing with gas cooling. We're just dropping it a couple of 100 degrees. So we can add this up, 3 megajoules. So 1 litre of water, if you're 100% effective, we can suppress 3 megajoules. Or 1 litre per second, 3 megawatts. How much does it take, how many megajoules to flash a room over? 2 to 3 megawatts. Wait a minute. So I could put with one door open, how much air is coming in And what sort of energy do we expect, say, in a room with one door open? Something like this. A bedroom fire, if you're 100% effective with your water, theoretically, if it all vaporizes, it's not much, a couple of litres, or theoretically 1 litre. So if we can't put it out, we're just missing, right? Our water's just not vaporizing, it's ending up somewhere else. So we'll just take this a bit further. There is an added bonus, more than 45%. We're going to stop that combustion. We're going to replace an inert. That's an added bonus. But if we park that for a moment and look at fire in a box, that's what we need. One of those in a concrete bunker, the size of your bedroom, one of those will fill it with flame, fully involved, 2 megawatts. But we've got to have a door open. One full door open, the maximum, and it's complex, like Karel said, maybe 4 megawatts. So we could have 20 of those in the room, but if that's the only thing open, it's still that, right? So if that's the only thing open and you control what's coming in, how much water should it take to put out a lounge room or a bedroom with only a door open? A couple of litres, if it all vaporizes. Water's amazingly effective. So how does one crew over another crew take hundreds of litres? Or why have we got a motor driver worrying about 2,000? Where's that water gone? It's missed. It's gone on the floor. It's gone down the hallway and hit the end of the hallway instead of going in the room. It's gone many places. It just hasn't gone on the fire.
If you're a regular listener to the podcast, then chances are you are big into your own personal development and the development of firefighters around you. So I wanted to remind you of our mobile app Drill Book. This is a free training and development resources made by firefighters for firefighters. Heading on to Drill Book, you will find incident debriefs, radio messages, notes and lines, quick reference guides, quizzes every single day. We've got useful links to the ERG, to Web Rescue, to Jessup, Euro Rescue, 10-second triage, National Operational Guidance, and not to mention our daily quizzes where you will find questions on extrication, casualty handling, breathing apparatus, fire development, water rescue, rope rescue, you name it. It is the go-to resource if you've got a spare 5 minutes on the firehouse to develop yourself and those around you. Not only that, if you're looking to get into the fire service, we've got advice on there on interview questions, interview answers. You can build your own questioning in there. And again, remember, this is built by firefighters for firefighters, so you can add your own drills in there. You can pick the drills that you find the most favorite. There is literally hundreds of training ideas, hundreds of drills in there. Remember, this app is absolutely free and it grows every single day down to the contributions of our thousands and thousands of users. It's freely available on Android, Apple, and you will find it in the links for this podcast. Remember, it's called personal development. The clue's in the name. You've got to work twice as hard on yourself as you do on the job. So always be growing, always be developing. Now let's get back to the show.
So, and as Karel was saying, if the naughty boy opens a window as well, we've got to expect heat release rate is going to increase. My biggest problem is, right, you can see how these two numbers are quite similar, right, if you're 100% effective. I ask my firefighters, do you think you're 100% effective? And most guys will be fair, they'll say, oh, about 30. Okay, well, if you're 30 and you're running 230 litres per minute, now we're down to this, right? Going down a hallway, and I think I've got a video here. If Australian firefighters are going the hallway and they hear windows break, it might go from 3 megawatts to 10 in a split second, and this ain't going to be good enough. This is going to be barely good enough. This flow rate is going to be barely good enough. That's why we won't take a first aid reel. We've got 19 mil high pressure into a house fire, and we haven't for the last 20 years. We used to. But once we start to have this discussion, there's no argument. And we have 38. It's not a big ask to take a 38 into a burning building. It might be a bigger ask to take double jacket 45 or double jacket 52, or, right? So here's a burn we did in an acquired structure burn in Gilgandra, a country town, in 2013. And we were helping out fire investigation, and each investigator got a room to burn and they could set the fire however they liked. And and my guys had to put it out, and we were lighting up this here. Now there's probably 10 to 15 megawatts worth of potential energy in there. It had carpet, it had a couple of sofas, right? And the front door was open. And Here it is, a bidirectional. This is the only place air is going in, the only place the smoke's coming out. For every kilogram of smoke coming out, an equivalent amount's going in of air, right? Can't have a vacuum in there, so we're seeing this exchange. It's fully involved in here. He's just cooling the eaves so it doesn't get up in the eaves and then the house will burn down. That is fully involved, maybe 3 to 4 megawatts. Now, in a moment, we have to knock it out so that fire investigation guys can go in and they can start their training. I'm sort of thinking, I'm carrying the camera here, it's on my camera. I'm thinking, well, I can't let it go too far. If it penetrates the gyprock, I lose the house. So I'm going to call it in a moment, and I sort of just go do an indirect attack. He's on 115 litres per minute. Out. But it sort of should be, because he was closed. He wasn't in a rip-roaring hallway with smoke down to the floor. He could put the droplets into the hot stuff. I should expect that knockdown. And then we got told to stop. And they said, oh, just stop. They had a look at it. There was just smouldering range. They said, let it burn again. We want more damage. So we waited a couple of minutes while it rekindled and it started up again. Have a look at this building again. This was the only thing we opened. A couple of minutes later, it's this. He's now on 360 litres per minute and he's hardly touching it. What's happened? The windows at the back failed. Single pane, we didn't break them. They just broke. They decided we've had enough and they broke. Now, he'll deal with that because he's in a safe area, but imagine if that was in a hallway, halfway up the hallway and those windows break, we've got problems. Didn't change the fuel, but we changed the air. So it's going to take a bit to put it out. Imagine in a hallway, you're already getting, the energy from 3 to 4 megawatts. Yeah, that's hot smoke. It's coming out. You're cooling it. You're making the hall. But then suddenly windows break and suddenly it turns from that to what you saw, to this. He can't get any closer because he'll melt his face mask. So you can see another guy here trying to, some little streams up so it doesn't get under the eave. That's our problem with single pane in my country, which is a problem. So if we can't put our water in the right place, maybe it's just difficult. We can't see. The geometry of the room is difficult, or an aerial trying to put it onto a roof like we do all the time. If we can't put it in the right place and we choose the wrong format, a straight stream in both those cases would have penetrated into the building but would have held its shape and ended up at the rear of the room and then landed on the floor. I could still put it out. I've just got to use a lot more water, right? I just have to, I won't be efficient. You just got to use more, that's all. When I was in the States, did I mention the US studies just with the exterior attacks and how they were deciding how much water they needed to use in the States? So the interior and exterior streams, we're all sitting in a room. There's 4 of us from overseas, myself, John Chubb from Ireland, Hans Neeling from the Netherlands, and Steve Bisbar from Canada. And we've got all the big hitters there on the panel, New York, Chicago, LA, all those big fire services and some smaller ones. And the first thing we had to decide, if you've seen the exterior and interior streams stuff from UL, was what hose are we going to use when we burn the 26 buildings sort of that they'd made. So it's American, so it had to flow 150 GPM, a combination fog set on 150 with 45, and that's flowing about 550 litres. So when you see the UL stuff and you see streams going in from outside, it's flowing 550 litres per minute, right? So they're not really comparing apples with our oranges in a sense. Or it was a smooth ball flowing about 600 litres. Then they turned to us and said, what do you guys flow? And I said, well, we flow so little it would give you nightmares. And they sort of, And I said, we flow between 115 and 230 litres per minute at 700 kPa through a line of 1.5 inches, 38 millimetre. And they sort of took stock, and then one guy goes, that's not too bad. Then one guy goes, he's talking litres, not GPM. And I said, yeah, it's litres. And then they take stock again, and then they just write you off. Well, you're obviously from a small brigade who doesn't get fires, and that's that. That's the only way it happens. So as correspondence went back and forth, I said, look, guys, I come from a city of 5.2 million. It sort of looks like San Francisco. It's not burning down, you know. If you put your water in the right place, there's other ways of doing this. But if you go down a hallway whipping around 2 inch or inch and, 3/4, and you're flowing 600 litres and you keep it on, it will go out. A tsunami of water, it will go out. It's effective, but is it efficient? And there's advantages of doing efficient. If you've only got 2 guys to put on the hose, they don't have to be monsters. You can have a more diverse fire service. You can have a quicker fire service. You can have smaller trucks. You can have less water. Maybe you don't have any water. Or maybe it's just that normally we spend an hour squeegeeing out the unit below because of all of our water. And during that hour, there was a call closer to our station, and we should have been home to turn out to that call, but instead we're doing these ones, right? That's not a good outcome. So I think we owe it to ourselves and to anyone that we help that we're as efficient as possible. So where did it all start? And this is, an American started it actually, indirect attack. There's Chief Lloyd Layman in the 50s. He was looking at how do we stop ships from sinking and having fires on ships? Well, you don't want to put a lot of water on. What happens if you put a lot of water on ships? The seaboard effect, yeah. So especially if it's high, we're trying to drain it, but you get an inch of water on the top of a ship and it capsizes. So he looked at injecting steam into the holes and where the storage was to put these fires out. And he transferred that thinking and did research into how you might apply that to houses, right? And here's some of the things he said. Perfection in the use of water as a fire extinguishing agent would be achieved if water could be applied in a form and a rate where the entire volume is turned to steam. That's your expectation. The rate of heat absorption can be increased by increasing the surface exposure. We want to have surface area. The smaller the droplet, the better the surface area. This is a natural law that firefighting profession can no longer afford to ignore. An American in 1950. The limited extinguishing action of a water applied in the form of a solid stream is due primarily to the limited surface exposure of the water in ratio to its volume. Those things are all true. That doesn't mean a straight stream at high volume isn't effective. It's just not as efficient. Royer and Nelson, working for Iowa University, I think, wasn't it? They then took that a bit further and said, well, we're going to do some tests and so on. And these are videos from that. Sound, please. And you'll see a distinction. They're going to say the combination attack, which is really what we call an indirect attack now, because they distinguish between a combination is hitting the three-dimensional space, if you like, but also hitting hot surfaces. And then they say indirect is just putting it in the smoke. Well, that sounds like gas cooling, but you'll see the distinction. When we do an attack now, we're basically doing what they would have called a combination attack, but we say it's indirect so we can make it the opposite to direct. Does that make sense? You'll hear...
If only 1 or 2 rooms are involved and one line will give sufficient flow, the combination method will give the fastest results with the minimum amount of water. This method cools the atmosphere and the heated materials at the same time. Consequently, large volumes of steam are generated and the fire is blacked out quickly. As compared with the combination method, the indirect attack continues steam production over a somewhat longer period of time. This can be used to advantage in a complex situation where several lines are necessary and their coordination is a problem. In any attack, the maximum absorption of water is utilized only when the water is converted to steam.
The maximum heat absorption of water is when it turns to steam. So essentially, just to get this straight, both of those look like they were doing the same thing, right? One they called indirect, the second one, and one they called combination. In their mind, the combination, they were hitting hot objects as well. We just accept that when you do that, you're going to hit hot objects, and we want you to hit hot hot objects to create more steam. So we cut out the combination. Both of those are what we would call indirect. And it started in the 50s and into the 60s. Not by the Swedes, but by the Americans. So what did the Swedes do? Well, they started looking at extreme fire behaviour, Gisselson, that's Mats Rosanda, and they said, well, look, for us, the extinguishment, yeah, we need to do that, but we're worried about guys on the journey. They're getting stuck on the journey. The fire's finding them. They're getting rapid fire progress towards them because the smoke is fuel around them. So we're going to use the same technique, if you like. We're going to cool it down by pulsing water into it. And that's the gas cooling that all you guys know and love and teach, and that both our organisations have been doing for some time. But there was also an underlying, and we're going to teach guys the back end about fire dynamics. So what do we do back home? We have gas cooling, which we separate from direct attack or indirect attack. Control and change, extinguish. As soon as we see the fire, we make our selection. There is no decision about, oh, it's instant. That gets us there safely, then we attack the fire. And we make a decision about what format is most appropriate. There's that video going, I don't need to see that again. Context is everything and takes time. I've sort of rushed through a lot of stuff, but with my guys, we're on 24-hour shifts. We will talk for hours and unpack this stuff and trying to come to the shared expectations. As soon as you don't do that, some guys may get it, some don't, some think they get it, and then you wonder why people do the things you don't think they're going to do. Remember, all elements of firefighting have a theoretical and practical component. You've got to decide what the balance is, either as an organisation or as the guy that's in charge at your station. Maybe you're the station officer and you can work out shared expectations with your guys. Maybe you're the duty commander and has got 15 stations, and you're going to work out what roles for C platoon or B platoon or A platoon.
Today's podcast is powered by our partner Lifelines and their revolutionary approach to functional hydration. Just like in firefighting, water is essential for body function, but studies show more than 80% of firefighters are dehydrated. A 25-year study findings from the National Institute of Health showed poor hydration to be linked to early aging and chronic disease, and even mild dehydration results in significant negative impact outcomes including headaches, exhaustion, rapid pulse, irritability, and poor cognitive function. A study conducted by Yale University showed that participants who were just 1% dehydrated had a 12% increase in errors when performing tasks that required cognitive flexibility. In addition, dehydration is shown to worsen mood and attitude, contribute to confusion and poor decision making, and negatively affect memory and judgment. In other words, you really don't want your incident commander, firefighter, or for that matter any first responder on a critical scene to be even slightly dehydrated. Mild dehydration occurs when a person is just 1.5% dehydrated, a condition that does not even trigger the thirst response in most people. So just imagine how quickly a firefighter or any first responder can and does become dehydrated in their day-to-day duties, which is why I address my hydration first thing every day with Lifelines. Go into the notes for this episode and specifically check out Lifelines Hydro Fuel and Hydro OG by clicking in the notes for the podcast for a clean energy solution designed for those who demand more from their day. Now back to the show.
And I think this is always going to be a sort of a moving feast. As we learn more stuff, as we put under pressure the things we know to be held true at the moment, and we start to move here. So really, where I'm at now, simple actions, simple thoughts done well is really important. I don't want to make things over complex. I don't want to dumb things down either. But ultimately, we have a physical capability and a speed to get water on the fire as soon as possible. I haven't really talked much about it, but we have a standard hose lay as well. And I was talking to some guys at lunch and I said, our guys don't have to make a decision on hose. They will run 70 mil at everything. And then they make a decision. Do I just put a branch on it and put 2,000 litres on this? Most of the time it'll be no, it's just a house. They'll just split it. They'll take one and they'll do their interior attack. Second arriving doesn't have to think about anything except where do you want the next hose, boss? I want it exposure, fire attack or search and rescue. They know it's there. Why? Because that's the plan every time. And they've got their hose in a Cleveland lay, in they go. The third reason we do it at every fire, even if it's a waste paper bin alight, Why would we do it even if it's a waste paper bin or light? Sorry? It's just muscle memory. That's the best practice you're going to get. You hop off a truck with the sirens blaring, you see a new environment, and you get it to work every time. There's no hose selection. There's no, will we take the reel? Will we take the 38? Will we take the 52? Will we take the 70? No, it's exactly the same every time. And that lay enables us to flow maximum water every time, which for us is just under 500 litres, right? So once again, simple system. Now, I went 15 years teaching some pretty heavy-duty fire science, which I don't think I really understood myself, and never taught that. But I would sort of say that that simple process of having a default hose lay every time and shared expectations, coupled with the non-negotiables, probably has brought more benefit and more success for me on the fire ground than someone knowing what a gravity current was, or a density difference between smoke and air was, or is that 600 degrees or 300 degrees. So I suppose the challenge is, as I couldn't be here without having gone through those years though, right? That's the other thing. I mean, I think everyone has their own journey, and maybe I can add a little bit of this that might jump in somewhere on your journey. You may disagree, you may agree, but yeah, so that's the end of that. But any questions, any thoughts on that, or? Yep.
You say you don't use hose reels at all anymore?
No.
That is our go-to.
Well, yeah, look, here's the weird thing.
22.
Yes. So here's the weird thing. When we started the CFBT, I'd start a class and I'd say, who's put a house out with a first aid reel? Do you call them first aid reels or? Hose reels, hose reels. And ours was 19 at the time. And the hands would go up. And the next question was, will it put your next fire out? And they go, maybe. And I go, why are you taking a first aid reel? Because we have a flaked 60 metres, 230 metres pre-connected with a nozzle on it. You can just take that 38 and walk towards the building, the other guy goes, click. And I go, could you get a 38 to work just as quickly? And they go, probably quicker. So why are you taking it? You know what I mean? So, but because our SOG said lay flat 38 is the minimum for a structure fire, that flip, once we started talking about water usage, was not a big one to take. So since the early 2000s, it's disappeared from the job, but it wasn't a hard battle because the next option wasn't onerous. In a sense, you know what I mean? But if the next option had been 45 double jacket or 50, they'd probably go, and guess what? I'll stick with the 25. But here's the thing, even the 19 was probably flowing 150 max. But I only have to give them an example of breaking 2 windows in the middle of the hallway and they're going, I'll take a bigger hose, thanks. Because I could give them proof that probably, if all things are equal, wasn't the right choice. Now that may be different with you guys because of double glazing and that happening, I don't know. But so the reels are really, we use them, they might pull them on a car, but they're more than likely to pull a 38 on a car as well. They will definitely use it for just, I don't know, well, we could probably not even have them in a sense, right? So it hasn't been a difficult process to say to guys, our biggest problem was not even using the 38s. Our biggest problem was getting guys to use the 38 to maximum. Right? No recruits ever even felt what a true 475 was. They did all their work at 115 to 230, right? So we'd have guys turning up to factory fires, not knowing what they were flowing, having to retreat when they couldn't put it out, and hand on heart, they couldn't actually say, I used all of my water as quickly as possible, and it was never asked. Sure.
You talk about flow rates a lot. In Lancashire, we just use pressure.
Yeah.
When I was in GMC, we used flow rates. Do you use flow rates or do you use pressure?
Traditionally, it was all about pressure. Like I said, the average answer we get, if I say, what are you going to flow on this? They'll just go, I don't know. And I say, well, what are you looking at? And they say, well, if the jet doesn't look very good, I ask for more pressure. It was always more pressure. And but this thought of what are you flowing, we were the same. It was all about pressure. So you could have a nice looking jet, but it could be a 115 on our flow control. Right? So, yeah, it's a big problem. And I say to my guys, if you can flow 475 and it doesn't go out and you have to pull out, hand on heart, not your problem. You did everything. But if you come out and we have a debrief and you told me that you only flowed half your water in that window of opportunity, that's criminal. Could you imagine the insurance companies pay 75% of our wages, 14% municipalities and 14% government, state government. That's how our fire brigade's funded. What if I had a debrief or had this discussion with insurance reps sitting there? You can imagine the guy go, run that past me again, right? Did that building have to, you know what I mean? It's bizarre, but no one ever questions it. No one holds anyone's feet to the coals and says, did you put the maximum amount of water in the shortest amount of time for this commercial fire? And yeah, try it. Just ask your guys. I suspect it might be similar to our guys. So, yeah.
In Belgium, we start to see lawsuits against the fire service, typically because the fire, from time to time, a fire rekindles, right? And yeah, lately I was involved in 2 lawsuits on the fire service side to claim, hey, we can't predict everything. But we didn't see that in the past, that the insurance company tried to recuperate money from the fire service. Like the Americanization of society, more and more lawsuits. So if we do a crappy job, we do less than what we could do, or less than, for example, what could be the standard, then I think it's not so, how should I put it? If you use too little water, because you use a hose reel instead of a flat line, and then the building burns down because you are not capable of applying the water you needed, then is it so far-fetched to say, well, the fire department is at least partially responsible for the damages?
And everything's being filmed. I didn't have to do my firefighting with everyone outside with a high-resolution camera. So, yeah, it's difficult, but the answer to your question, really, no. We have lightweight construction a lot too, so windows breaking. We have about 12 minutes before it goes for the gyprock in a lightweight construction, so, you know, speed's important. To some degree, volume's important, but if you talk to American firefighters, they'll say, if they're being nice, they'll say, well, the reason we use more water and bigger hoses is because we have lightweight construction. Well, hold my beer, so do we do in Australia. So, you know, efficient and effective are 2 different words, and they shouldn't be confused. You can be effective by using too much, but you're not being efficient. And efficiency gives you other advantages, and I think that's where we're heading. At one point, if you said you're designing your own fire service, what would be your default hose? One part of me saying, I don't know, 42, 45. I would still say 38 because it makes my guys quicker and I can have 2 on a hose. That means if I've got 4 guys, I've got 2 hoses. I have other options. I can have a more diverse fire service. I can have a quicker fire service. I can have, you know, like I'd still probably stick at that. But the majority of our guys wouldn't be using, for 90% of their fires, internally on a residence, they wouldn't be using more than 25 mil high pressure anyway. But you're tapping out when they've got that extra. And that extra, if you never use it in your career, great. Use it one day in your career. It's not one of those sort of stories. Especially coming from me, that if I'm sending them in, now the next thing is I've got to make sure that they're able to choose it at the right time. You know, so yeah. There was another question, I think. Well, I would first have to accept that it is more complex, and I don't accept that premise from the outset, right? But it's a common premise. I don't think that staying low and holding a nozzle at a certain angle and holding this open at a certain angle is the hardest thing any firefighter's ever been asked to do, right? Many firefighters around the world are paramedics and they intubate and they do a whole range of things. Ask a rescue firefighter. The manipulation and the coordination and the techniques that they might use rescue tools is way and above what we're asking someone to do to gain an extra efficiency. Look at your rope experts. The complexity of the anchor systems that are just taken for granted. No one tries to dumb them down and say, you know what, this is too hard. Let's find a simpler way of doing this. So that's normally my answer. I just firstly don't accept that that's difficult compared to many of the things we do. It's just difficult if you don't practice it. right? And it gets back to what are your motivations for doing it? I mean, and that gets back to that leadership sort of sense. And Karel talked a lot about it. The biggest motivator is to be seen to be good at what you do. Now, if you can build that in your crew, and I sort of like build it in this back end that sort of says we're better than A and better than D and better than better than B. We're C platoon. I say things like that. And to our retained firefighters who work across all shifts, when you're on C platoon, you're C platooners, and we roll different. So they're going, we want to be C platooners. You build this esprit de corps that says, we're going to learn this stuff and we're going to be better and we're going to have some wins. And our fires go out and we have wins where, you know, so you start to build this and that sort of motivation to be better at that. I think it's an English-Australian, nearly a European thing, I suppose. There's no kudos to be gained by a firefighter to be good on the hoses. There's an enormous amount of kudos to be the rescue guy. Oh, that guy's fantastic. He knows he's great on the tools, right? Or the rope guy. He's got all the stuff hanging off him. He's remarkable. When was the last time anyone said that about a firefighter in Europe or Australia about what they were like on the nozzle and how they were able to extinguish fires and they had the full range of technique? It's just good enough is good enough. So I think all of that plays into it, but your question is often stated. And the easiest thing would be to accept that premise and say, yeah, it's tough, right? And then you have people, no names, no pack drill, but, you know, it's established that this is difficult to do, therefore should we do that? Well, I'm not establishing this is difficult to do. If you don't practice it, you suck, right? But I'd also contend that when you're looking at a double jacket 45 and you're whipping that water around, there's technique involved there to do that properly. You can afford to miss a lot because the extra water, you know what I mean? You're compensating for a lack of efficiency and a lack by just applying more. So, bit of a long answer, but you get it all the time. I get it all the time. Why not just do the easier thing? Well, one, you have to accept it's easier, and I don't. Yeah. And that puts a large onus, just to finish, on the instructors. If your instructors suck, they're the models for the guys that are coming. You know, that's a big thing with instructors, to have the really good technique and to be comfortable and show that this isn't the hardest thing in the world to do.
The Firefighters Podcast was created to recognize, acknowledge, inspire, and hopefully even motivate these incredible individuals who have chosen to be part of the first responder community. Our driving purpose is to create a legacy resource for the current and future generations of firefighters and first responders. We get some incredible feedback from listeners and guests, and as the podcast grows, our desire to create longevity and sustainability means that we are asking for the support of our listeners. If you want to support the podcast, if you want to get discounts to our merchandise, hoodies, clothing, coins, patches, tallies, and also access to all of the incredible documents get shared with us from our podcast guests and sector leaders, then please head over to our Patreon page, and for just £3 a month, you can support the future of the podcast. Please finally hit that follow, subscribe, or rate button on the platform you're listening, and wherever you're around the world, please support your emergency services responders, and thank you for listening.